Welcome to our interview of the week. And this is Rabea Brauer from the Konrad-Adenauer Foundation. And with me is my colleague Chris Paris, who you remember and have met throughout her weekly videos on economic situation all over Asia. And the third person, we are very, very honored to welcome Nishchal Pandey today as our first interviewee.
Thank you, Rabea, for this opportunity. The Consortium of South Asian Think Tanks, COSAT, has been a partner of the Konrad-Adenauer-Stiftung since 2008. And I've been part of this network now for more than 12 years. And the Center for South Asian Studies is also part of this network. We have some of the most prominent think tanks of South Asia as network partners. And we are thankful to CAS for its support all along these 12 years. We're talking about this pandemic situation in Nepal. We are not as bad as the other countries in other regions. We just have 16 cases confirmed, 16, and 0 deaths thus far. So in comparison to others, I think it's pretty much a good situation that there are only 16 confirmed cases. But unfortunately, there's a lot of Nepalese living and working abroad, and that has raised the total tally. So we already have 13 Nepalese, 13, dying abroad. The biggest worry here is that we have an open border with India. And as the situation evolves in India, then we'll have to watch this very carefully because we have an open border. It is being regulated at the moment, but anything happening there will have consequences here. Number two, we also have a very large Nepalese diaspora living and working abroad, including in the Middle East, Korea, Malaysia, even in Japan. So these Nepalese workers, they may be wanting to come back home. Now, if they come back home, it will have a direct impact on our remittances because 23% of our GDP is remittance. And also there will be consequences of unemployment. What are they going to do back home? If they come en masse back to the country, then how are we going to cope with the situation? A lot of times we have seen that economic vulnerability pushes a country to political instability. And that is another cause of worry. The third situation is the impact on tourism. Airlines are hit big time. Hotels and resorts and restaurants are empty. So people who are working in these places, how long will they be able to stay without work? The employers may not be able to give salary. For 1 or 2 months, it's not a problem, but later on, it can be a cause of worry. And the fourth is the supply chain disruptions on agriculture and food insecurity. Because if you go for a longer period of lockdown, then how will the trucks and other vehicles, cargo, they will not be able to carry vegetables and fruit and grain into the cities. And then you'll have a problem of food insecurity, as we are already seeing in many parts of South Asia. So generally, this is going to be the situation. But I'm also a little optimistic about one point, Rabea, and that is that unlike in a tsunami or an earthquake or in a huge disaster, everything here is in place. All our institutions, the banking system, financial system, everything is in place. It is not a big earthquake or a disaster. Nothing has collapsed. So the moment you say that, okay, from May 1, we are going back to work, or June 1, we are going back to work, everything else is in place. The flights will start operating, the hotels will start operating, so there will be absolutely no problem. So that is one aspect that I'm a little hopeful about. Unlike in the previous crisis, unlike in the financial crisis of 96, 97, when institutions collapsed, when systems collapsed, here nothing has been disrupted. The only problem is the pandemic. And if we are able to open it up, the whole entire system is in place. So that is a note of optimism.
Thank you very much, Nishchal, for that update. Before I hand over to Chris, I just have one question. We all know that things once the pandemic is called over, and with our measures of caution, of course, things will become and go back to normal. However, shouldn't the industries and companies think about reform? So did Nepal work or is thinking ahead on imposing reforms to make the labor market more stable to situations like this?
Yeah, no, this is a very important question because after 2015, we had a very big earthquake, 7.8 in the Richter scale, and thousands of people died. And we were just recovering for that earthquake, and here we are into another kind of economic turmoil. So, and before that, we also had 10 years of Maoist insurgency, and there was a period of peace process. So one after the other, every 4 or 5 years, there has been a crisis, and we have just been trying to manage it somehow or the other. According to South Asia Economic Focus, the growth in the region, the entire South Asian region, is likely to be now only 1.8 to 2.8% this year. That is down from 6.3%. So that will be the lowest in 4 years or in 4 decades. Also, the other aspect of this economic package is that the India has announced $23 billion of aid relief. Pakistan Prime Minister has applied to the international community for debt relief so that they can deal more effectively with the economic fallout from the coronavirus. What we have done here is that the finance minister has very recently proposed that the loan repayment will be slightly delayed for about 3 months. The people who have taken loans, they can pay 3 months later. Now, these are only, I think, cosmetic changes.
Yes.
But what exactly is going to happen is that, the banking system will be now affected because people will not be able to pay back their loans. There will be problems of remittances because the labor will start coming back home. There will be problem on, as I mentioned, on agriculture and food insecurity. And I think there will be a slightly problem. But here we are seeing that the state banking system, the state also has some banks. It is not that the entire thing is private sector. In South Asia, governments also own some banks. So I think their role will be critical as we move ahead. Or if the global recession and for instance, the IMF, International Monetary Organization, has also announced that it will provide immediate debt relief to 24 countries, including Nepal. Now, if we get that opportunity, then it will be slightly better for these developing economies like ours in South Asia. But if you look at the entire South Asian situation, I think Maldives is very badly hit because its entire economy is based on tourism, and they will take time to recover. In India, we'll have to see it very carefully because it's the largest economy in the region, the biggest powerhouse in the region. How will they deal with the situation? I think it will have an impact on the entire region. And on the question of technology, equipment, I think we are now only beginning to see the problems of medical supplies. When we were hit badly, we didn't have enough ventilators, we didn't have face masks, gloves, the personal protection equipment, PPEs, so and the hand sanitizers. So now we are beginning to see that these are very important elementary things of medical supply, for which we should be self-reliant really. And now we are trying to import it from China and elsewhere, and it is not possible. Only little bit is coming through. Other countries have stopped export. So here we are dependent on even these elementary things, which needs to be really, thought of in the longer term.
Yeah, thank you very much. Chris, your call.
Yes. Oh, I was wondering if the Finance Ministry of Nepal has the necessary fiscal space to compensate those whose incomes have been lost.
I think the entire situation in South Asia, we are trying to see from what others are doing. So here we are. I think the best examples are from India and Pakistan, because India has just announced $23 billion of relief package, and that is not going to be enough because the entire economy is hit very hard. But their pharmaceutical industry could itself play a very big role to revive the economy. because now India is exporting a lot of these critical medicine, especially for malaria eradication. They have some medicine which is used for diseases such as malaria that is now being used for COVID-19. So pharma industry itself is going to do a great deal for India. Pakistan, we see that they have applied for debt relief. A lot of their income is gone on debt servicing. So they have applied for complete debt relief for a considerable length of time. For us in Nepal, we are just seeing how the Bangladeshis, Nepalese, the Indians, the Pakistanis will handle the situation. And as I mentioned, this 3 month period of debt relief that you know that you don't have to pay back your loan is not going to be of much help. We need a far greater economic stimulus in the economy. People have to get jobs. There will be layoffs, and a lot of people will apply for unemployment benefits, but we don't have any unemployment benefits here in South Asia. So these are questions that the government will have to answer really. And right now the situation is just evolving. But as I mentioned earlier, uh, since the death toll is zero as far as Nepal is concerned, and the confirmed cases is just 16, we should be able to get back, if the neighborhood is stable, we should be able to open up pretty soon. And then after that, I think the government will have to really see to it what really can be done to resurrect the economy. One of the critical questions will be the Nepalese migrant workers living and working abroad. If they come back from UAE, Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, Qatar, Malaysia, Korea, then we have a real problem. But if they don't, then they will go back to the work, the business, their offices, and they will keep on sending back the remittances. So it will not be a greater impact. But if they do come back, then we'll have to see the entire picture from a different outlook.
Is the political leadership dealing with the pandemic in Nepal? Do you think they deliver a suitable response?
I think the government response has been adequate, because whatever others are doing around the world, we did it also. Lockdown, social distancing, closing down of all the entertainment, sports, big events, and complete lockdown. So that perhaps worked. And but we were a little slow in closing down the flights. And as a result, most of these cases that are confirmed, they have come from abroad. So that was, I think, the primary response. People are generally happy because when we see the neighborhood, so many deaths in India, so many deaths in Pakistan, but zero in Nepal and just 16 cases, I think we are on a positive trajectory. But if we loosen it out at this moment, we could see a spike. And we don't know whether we are in the bottom of the curve or on the middle of the curve, or the curve is still coming. We are not sure. There are so many ifs and buts in this pandemic, and so many unknown variables. Another problem is that the most Nepalese will have some relative or a friend or a close person living in the United States and Australia. A lot of them have migrated and they are PR holders in Canada. And here we see the picture of US, in New York, and the situation in Australia. It's so bad. There are no ventilators. And when we see that and compare ourselves, and we see that, we are a poor developing country, and here is the superpower of the world. And even they are struggling so much. So the situation here is not so bad. I mean, if we have been able to tap the case right now with zero deaths, I think this is a positive development, and we should be able to open up sooner than the rest of the world, actually.
Yes. So how is this pandemic changing Nepal-China relations?
The second largest cluster of tourists coming to Nepal are from China. The first are the Indians. The second are the Chinese. That has now become complete zero. So the flights have now been disrupted. There are no flights to China, and the Chinese tourist has become zero. So this is going to really impact on the tourism industry, as it is going to impact on Southeast Asian economies, because the Chinese tourists really comprise of the largest chunk of tourists in Asia and perhaps also in Europe. Number one. Number two, I think the major cause of worry right now is that the medical equipment, the PPEs, the personal protective equipments, we did not have enough. We did not have hand sanitizers, gloves, face masks, and ventilators. Now all these have to be imported as soon as possible. And the government of Nepal has called out, and we are also using Nepal Army to try to bring this in an urgent basis. But no country is exporting. They have all stopped export. All the countries that were exporting these medical equipment were India, Korea, Japan, and these countries. Now, all of them have been suffering from COVID-19, and they are no longer able to export. So here we are dependent now completely on China for bringing these medical equipment like ventilators, gloves, hand sanitizers, face masks. And this is urgently required because it has a political fallout also if the government is unable to bring these equipment from China. So here we have been sending airplanes, and the private sector is also involved trying to get these equipment. But as we see that in the period that has elapsed, other countries have taken the benefit, and Iran, Egypt, even United States, other countries have started to import these equipment from China, and the priority has now gone to United States and Europe. So here in the neighborhood, we are not getting these equipment, but our government is trying its best. The third aspect of Nepal-China relations for the moment will be on economic assistance, because the other countries that were giving us economic assistance will now be focusing on their own economy. So the priority will shift, and therefore will be, I think, dependent on economic assistance from China. So overall, when I see Nepal-China relations, of course, it has been affected at the level of the common man. They call this, everybody knows that the virus originated from Wuhan. Everybody knows that China was a little slightly slow in their adaptation and in their approach towards this virus. But 2-3 months later, here we are again dependent on medical supplies and medical equipment from China. And later on, 2-3 months later, I think we'll be wanting to have Chinese tourists back to the tourism industry, because without them, I don't think there will be any other large chunk of tourists coming from anywhere else in the world. So I think that is going to be the picture largely of all Southeast Asian economies, including Thailand, Singapore, even Malaysia. More or less, that is going to be the picture, because we are dependent on their tourists to a very large extent. Our entertainment, food industry, restaurants, hotels are very largely dependent on the very large number of Chinese tourists that come, and especially February, New Year's time. They used to come in a very large number, and that has now completely been zero.
Yeah. Thank you very, very much, Nishchal.